Hey guys, today we're going to be working on a Minecraft VFX shot inside of Blender. Now the final result was at the beginning of the video, so let's go ahead and get started. Now if you want to work along with us, I have all the files that I use in the description below. So let's go ahead and get started inside of Blender. We're going to click up here, go to the VFX motion tracking tab. Now we actually need to motion track our footage, so let's open that up. Okay, so here is my footage right here, the MP4. Now we're just going to open that clip up. Now the first thing that we need to do is make sure that our colors match, so let's come up to the render properties, go up to the view transform and change that to standard. Now we need to set the scene frames and prefetch our footage. Now I won't be going too much into depth about how I camera track. If you want that tutorial, the link is in the description below, but we can go ahead and do my basic setup. So let's come down here to the previous frame. Then we also need to change the correlation to 8.9. This basically means that Blender has to be 90% sure that the tracker is correct for it to continue tracking. Next, let's just make sure that normalize is on. And then we can go ahead and place down a tracking marker by hitting Control and clicking. Next, we can hit Alt S to reveal our search area. So we need to change around some of these values. I'm going to change my pattern size just up a tad. And then we also need our search size up a lot. So let's just go ahead and delete this one. Next, we actually need to come to the first frame of our footage, and I like when Blender does all the work for me and I don't have to manually place all my tracker markers around. So what we can do is hit this detect features button over here, and Blender will automatically detect some of the features it thinks that will track correctly. So we can just open up this menu down here, and we want a lot of tracking markers, so I'm just going to make the threshold a 0.01, and then this distance we can just change to an 80. Just to get a lot more markers in our scene, and then we can just hold Control and T to track all of them. Okay, so our first set of tracking markers have just finished. We can scrub throughout and see all this mess. We can see that some of them are starting to go out around the edges, but that's just because it loses view in the camera. So let's scrub out. We can see that a lot of them get lost around this area. So I'm actually going to do another round of detect features. So just hit this button again, and then just Control T. It should keep all your settings from earlier. And just like that, we now have our second round done, and it's basically refined this area a lot more and added a lot more tracking markers, because really the more tracking markers the better, in my opinion. So anyway, now that we have a lot of tracking markers throughout our clip, we can actually go ahead and solve our camera motion. Now we will notice that none of the tracker markers actually make it in this final area, and that's just because I'm so close to the ground and everything. So I'm not really going to deal with that for this tutorial. So I'm basically just going to set it, let's set it to 191 is where I'm going to end my footage. So let's now come to the solve section to solve our camera motion. Now for the A and B keyframe, we need to find an area where there is a lot of parallax that Blender is going to use to actually calculate our solve. So for me, if I actually hide all these markers, we can see that I have a lot of parallax in this area right here. So for me, I'm going to set my A and B keyframe to be from 35 to 75, just because that's where a lot of parallax is. So again, 35, and then B is going to be my 75. So that is good. Let's just unhide those by hitting Alt H. So there is all of our markers again. And we also want to refine our focal length, optical sensor, and radial distortion. Next, we can solve our camera motion by clicking this button. Okay, so our first solve error is a 0.57. That is actually really good. So that's very promising. We can actually come out and clean that up. We want to try to get that as low as possible. I'm going to try to shoot for under a 0.3 for this tutorial. So let's clean some tracks. I'm going to make my reprojection error, just move that up until we have a few of these guys right here. And then we can just delete those. Now let's solve the camera motion again to see what that brings us to. Okay, so just with that, that already brought it down to a 0.43, so we can just clean that track one more time. Let's bring this up, I'm going to say around here, and then we're just going to delete that and solve the camera motion again. Okay, so I'm just going to keep repeating that step until we have our solve error down below a 0.3. Okay guys, so I was able to get my solve error down to a 0.28 just by cleaning those tracks and everything. So that is looking good. We can see that our blue line down here is pretty consistent throughout, so that is a good sign. You want to make sure that it's a straight line, doesn't have any ups and downs. That's basically our solve error throughout our clip. So that is looking good right now. Now we just need to set up our tracking scene, and then we can get on to the actual Minecraft animation and everything. So let's come out and set up tracking scene. You should see over here that we have all of our dots and everything, but we can see that this is basically our floor, but our plane and stuff isn't on the floor, so it's going to look like it's floating in midair. So what we actually need to do is define where our floor region is. So over here in this panel, let's just hit Alt D to kind of hide some of the non-visible tracking markers. Then just scrub through out our clip. We need to basically find an area where it's going to be a 90-degree triangle on our floor. So I am going to select this point, and this point, since these are kind of making a 90-degree triangle on our floor. And then we can just hit, over in this orientation tab, just hit floor right there. And you can see that has already set a lot of our tracking markers on the floor plane. Let's just come into our camera to kind of view what that looks like. So that looks pretty good and everything. Let's actually go ahead and set up the origin. Let's set the origin to be here. And then the y-axis we can set up to be this one, just to align everything. Okay, so now everything is aligned. We can see that this is a little too big for my liking. So I'm going to actually select two objects right down here. And then let's set the scale, and then we can just drag until I have a scale that I'm pretty happy with. So that looks pretty good. We can actually see up here, if we go into the layout tab, let's just see how well the footage actually tracked. So let's hit G, Z, control, move that up one, and then we can actually hide this little plane layer. And now let's see if this cube looks like it's actually sitting on the ground and everything. So we can see that that's done a really good job. We can't really see any movement or anything, so that is looking pretty good. So this is what I'm going to keep. Okay, let's just undo that hide by hitting Alt-H. And then we can actually go ahead and change around some settings that Blender automatically set up from this tracking scene. We can go ahead and delete this background collection and also this background view layer. Blender just automatically makes those, but I never use them, so I just like deleting them. And since we deleted those, we also need to come up to the compositing tab and delete these. These basically just correspond to that thing that we just deleted, so we don't really need those as well. Just free up some space in our compositing that we will be using later. Okay, so let's come out to the layout tab now. Now we actually need to define where our hole is going to be in our world. So let's just, first of all, we don't really need this right here. And let's just move this down, G, Z, and then we're just going to hold control, snap that down 1, 2. Now the top face is going to be on our floor. So this is basically going to be a hole where our top face is going to be. Okay, so now let's move this where our hole is going to be. So let's G, Shift, Z to move it on every axis but the Z axis. Let's move it right here, let's say. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm actually going to move it a little bit out, like right there. I think it's going to look pretty good. So now that we have that, we actually need to make it out a little bit, because if we render this now, we'll actually see the sides of this, and we actually want it to be a hole. So let's go into Tab, into Edit Mode, hit 3 to go into Face Select, hit X to delete this face, like that. And then we actually need to select all of these edge loops over here. So hit 2 to go into Edge Select. We're just going to hold Alt and click this to select this edge loop. And then we can hit E to extrude. But instead of extruding up or out, we actually need to extrude sideways on every direction. So we can actually do that by hitting S to scale and just move that out right now. So this is basically going to cover up this little hole. We need this to be a holdout texture, which is basically going to make everything behind it transparent, whereas this is going to be our Minecraft texture right here. So let's go ahead and set that up by coming over here to the material preview. Let's come over here. I'm going to name this holdout just for the sake of this, and change this from principled BSDF up here to holdout. And again, that's just going to make everything behind it be transparent. Now we don't want all the faces to be a holdout texture, so what we need to do is go back into Edit Mode by hitting Tab. Then we're going to make a new material. I'm going to call this grass, like that. And then we actually need to select only the faces inside here. So I'm going to go into Face Select, hit Alt, and click just inside there. So now we have all these faces selected. And then over here we need to assign this to be our grass material. So now this face over here is a holdout, all these faces here, but these faces inside are now our grass material. One final thing that I noticed that we need to do is actually delete this bottom face right here as well. So just hit X and then delete the faces. Okay, so now if we go into the camera view and then go into render, you will notice that we can only see the little hole right here, and all of this is transparent over here. We do need to go ahead and set up some render settings and everything. So come over here, render properties, we need to go to cycles, go to GPU compute. And then I'm going to do all my basic render properties that I set up. So first of all, I'm just going to change this to 64, adaptive sampling on, viewport denoising, I'm going to change on. Then in light paths, I like to set all these to 3. We might need to change those later, so just remember we might come back to that. The caustics, I like to change both of those off. And then in the performance, since I'm rendering on a GPU, I like to do 512 by 512. That just renders it a bit faster. And then finally, we're just going to leave the color management to standard since it's just a Minecraft world. Now you will notice that we have all this thing that's kind of weird right now. And that's actually because we don't have film transparency turned on. So let's go ahead and do that. In the same render properties over here, we need to go to film and then make sure transparent is selected. Now we can see all of this, and this is looking exactly how we want it to. Okay, so to actually get the grass texture of Minecraft on here, we actually need to play around with some of the UV maps and also some texture work and everything. So let's come to the shading tab. Then just going to go to the material options down here, select grass since that is what we're going to be working on. Now we actually need to import in our image, so let's add a image texture node and then open that up. Okay, so here is the grass JPEG that we're going to use, so just open that up. And then we're going to plug that into the principled BSDF. We can see that it's already done this. However, we do need to actually UV wrap that and everything. So an easy way, we can go into UV editing up here. And we can go ahead and go into the material preview just down here so we can mess around with the UVs and everything. Over here, we can just open up our grass JPEG so we can view that a little bit easier. We can actually select these different things, and we notice over here that we actually have whatever we have selected is now over here. So that's very nice. If we want to actually just automatically select this, we can just hit this little button and it'll basically select all that at the same time as we select this over here, and it's just really nice process. Actually, what we can go ahead and do is just Alt and click and select all of these and scale those all at the same time. So right now I'm just going to scale this up like that. Basically, we just want to make sure that this cube is in the middle of our cube down here. So I'm just going to G, and you can also hold Control, and that'll snap it a bit and help you out there. So that is looking good. We also need to rotate it, so let's rotate it -90. Let's try that. And then again, you just might have to move it and everything right there. So that is looking good. So this is what it should look like for you. And if we actually view this down here, we can actually see that we have all of our faces with that grass texture and everything. And the reason we don't have to select each individual face and place it on this little texture right here is because it actually repeats. So this texture will repeat over and over and over. So it should be the same since everything's a cube and we aligned it correctly and everything. So that's how you actually texture the grass object. Okay, so let's go back to shading. I like to actually add in some detail for this grass, make it a little bit 3D and cooler looking, because right now it's basically just a blank Minecraft texture and everything. So let's go ahead and add in some color ramps here, and then we need to duplicate it here. Let's bring those out a bit. Okay, so these color ramps are going to basically control the specular and our roughness right here. So let's plug the color of our image into both of those just so we can play around with this a little bit. Put this one into the roughness and this one into the specular. We can actually shift control click to view what those look like. I'm just going to bring these in a tad. Nothing too fancy, just because it's just going to be super easy. Texture work and everything, it's not going to make that big of a deal, but we can see it adds a little bit of shine and everything to it. Now the biggest thing that we're going to do is actually we're going to go ahead and add in some displacement. Now displacement is really nice because it's actually going to make some geometry and everything. So we're just going to place a displacement node down here. We need to connect the color up to our height right here. And then finally this displacement is going to go into the displacement of our material output right there. So we can kind of see this is the setup we have. Now you will notice it's only displacing on the actual plane and everything. It's not actually making geometry. And that's only because we have 4 faces right here. It doesn't really have enough geometry to actually extrude it and everything. So we need to come up to the modifiers. We're going to add a subdivision surface modifier. You can see it's done all this wonky stuff, but don't really worry. We can just change that to simple, and that goes back to that. Next, we need to go up to this and actually enable the experimental feature set, just because it gives us access to some of Blender's experimental features that we're going to be using. So let's go back into the modifiers, and now we should see that we have this adaptive subdivision right here. So let's just turn that on. And that basically means that places closer to the camera, it's going to subdivide more, compared to places further away from the camera, it's going to subdivide less and everything. It's just a real nice way to get a lot of subdivision with less performance usage in Blender. Finally, you should see that nothing has really changed, and that's actually because we have a setting change off in our actual material So let's come over here. We're gonna basically come down here, go to settings, and you should see that the displacement right now is set to bump only. However, if we change it to displacement only, we should see that we now actually have it extruding out and actually creating geometry, whereas before it was kind of faking geometry and everything. So right now I'm just gonna set it to a low value. Let's try a 0.05. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so let's try a 0.1. Like that. Basically just play around with it. You will see that it's inverted. You can see that the grass is going in, and we don't want that. So let's just add a quick invert node right here before our displacement, and now that's a little bit better. Okay, so here are my final settings I'm going to be using for this grass. I was playing around with it a little bit, and I settled with a 0.2 for my scale and everything, leaving the mid-level there. Sometimes you'll have to mess around with the mid-level, but we didn't really have to mess around with it this time. So that's looking pretty good. We can actually go ahead and view what that looks like right here. You will notice it's very dark and everything, and so that's actually because we haven't messed around with the lights in our scene. We have this one light up here, but I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete that since we're not going to be using that. What we can actually do is go up here into the world settings. This is basically the shading for the world. And I actually downloaded an HDRI trying to match it as closely to the lighting in my actual scene. So let's just go ahead and add that in by adding in an environment texture and plugging the color into our background. And let's just open that up. Okay, so here is the HDRI we're going to use, this abandoned tank farm. We can just open that up. And you can see that's already matched our lighting a lot better, but you will see that the sun is kind of going the wrong way. We need the sun to be going off to the top right and everything basically. So what we can do is actually we're going to come up to the material preview. But we lose our HDRI, so we need to come to this and then set the scene world. We need to check that. So now we actually have our HDRI and our scene again, and now it's like real time, whereas rendered would be not real time. Basically, we just need the sun to be over in this direction. So what I'm going to do is, if you have the Node Wrangler add-on installed, you're going to Control T, and that's going to add a texture coordinate and mapping node, and then we're just going to set the rotation on the Z. We're just going to rotate that until the sun is kind of over here. And so now if we go into the render view, we can actually see that this is a lot better. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually render out an image just to see what we have so far. Okay, so here is what we have so far. We basically have our hole in the ground and everything, and our nice geometry of the actual Minecraft block and everything, so that is all looking good. However, you will notice it looks kind of fake just because it looks like we have something on top of our video where it's not really blended in correctly. So we actually need to blend in the grass a little bit more just to make it look a little bit more realistic. So let's go ahead and do that before we mess around with anything else. Okay, so to get started, we need to come out to the layout tab. We actually need to make some grass blades, and to do that, we're just going to add in a simple plane. I'm just going to rotate that on the X 90 degrees. Let's rotate it on the Z 90 degrees as well. And then we're just going to scale that down a little bit. Then we need to go into edit mode by hitting tab 2 for edge select. And we basically just need to hit E to extrude those up a bit. We're just going to extrude it a couple times up. You can see it's kind of random right now and it's going around. Just let it go crazy and everything. Next, we can actually turn on this mode up here, which is proportional editing, which basically means that if we scroll out, we can actually affect multiple different faces at once. So what we need to do is select this top face right here. We're just going to press S to scale, and then come out here. We're just going to scale that down a bit, and you can scroll with your scroll wheel to actually affect how large of an area it's affecting. So I'm just going to set it like that. And then we can also G to rotate, you know, try to change that up a bit. Just make it look like a grass blade, basically. So that is pretty good. This is not going to be seen, so you don't have to make it super detailed or whatever. We're also going to duplicate that, so I'm going to Shift D to duplicate that real quick. And then I'm just going to make this a little more crazy and everything, just because I don't want them to look the same. I kind of want them to be a little bit different, like that. This one is also going to be taller, so let's just hit SZ to scale on the Z, like that. So now we have our two grass blades and everything, so that's looking pretty good. We can just plop these guys off to the side like that. Now we actually need to make a particle system around our little area over here. Now I'm going to add in a separate object to control our particle system. So let's just hit Shift A, add a mesh plane, like that, and we can actually position that over here like that, and then just scale that up a tad. Now we actually need to add a particle system to this, so let's come over here, particle system. Let's hit plus to add a new one. We need it to be on hair and advanced hair to be selected. Now you should see that it's basically made all of this, and we don't want this to be on the whole object. We only want it to be around the actual grass block and everything. So what we can do is actually play around with some weight paints and everything. But first of all, to do that, we actually need a lot of geometry on this plane. So what we need to do is come over here. We need to add a subdivision surface modifier, simple. And then we need to crank this all the way up to 6 on both of those, and then just apply that. Now we actually have a lot more geometry to work with in our plane and everything, so that's looking good. Next thing that we can do is come over here, and we need to go into weight paint. And basically we just need to paint around this little cube in the center. So just, again, like I said, just paint around, trying to get a lot of values over here around this, this little cube in the middle. And if we go over here into the vertex groups, you can see that it's actually making us a new vertex group. And so that is what we want. We want it to be its own vertex group and everything. So once you have it painted around, it doesn't need to be perfect, but something like this, we can actually come out of that back into the object property, or object mode, sorry. And then we can go into the particle properties. And down here in the vertex groups, we can set the density to be our group that we just created, and now only the hair spawns in that area. Now we actually don't want it to be hair, we want it to be those grass blades that we just created. So let's go ahead and set that up by coming over here to the render properties. Render as, well, we want to render it as both of these grass blades. So what we actually need to do is make these to be its own collection. So let's just select both of those, right click, and then move to collection. We're going to hit new collection. I'm just going to call this collection grass. Hit OK. So that is looking good now. We have our grass collection. So again, select this plane over here. We need it to render as collection. And then our collection that we just created is grass. So now we have all of these grass blades in our view and everything. So that is looking very good. You will notice that some of the blades go underneath. So if you wanted to fix that, you can actually select this. Go into edit mode, hit A to select all those, and then GZ, move that up until this little dot is on the ground. That'll just fix that. Okay, so with that now fixed, we can go back into this. Now we need to mess around with some properties just because this doesn't look too good right now. Let's go ahead and go to the render properties. We need to set the scale of our thing. So that is looking like an OK scale. Let's actually change that down to a 0.005. So that looks pretty good. We can also play, let's make the scale randomness all the way, just so we can play around with that. I'm actually going to increase the scale. Let's try a 0.01. That looks pretty good. We can change this later, but that's why I'm going to leave it as now. Let's come to the rotation. We're going to add some rotation. We're going to randomize that rotation and the phase and everything, random phase, just to give it kind of more randomness. We want it to look as random as possible. And then the velocity, we can also mess around with that. We can make some random object velocity just to make it a little bit more clustered and look like grass. Okay, I do notice right now that my grass is a little bit too big still, so I'm just going to come over here and divide this by 2, and that should give us a little bit more. We can add more particles later. We can actually add in some children in a little bit, but for now this is what I'm going to stick with. So that is looking pretty good and everything, but we actually, if we come out to rendered, we should see that it's not rendered correctly or anything. So first thing that we need to do is actually to uncheck this show emitter. That will basically mean that the plane is not going to be rendered, only the particles are. It won't change anything in the viewport, but when we render it, it will actually change, so don't worry about that too much now. But you'll still see that these grass blades are rendering out as white. And we actually don't want that. We actually want these to be rendered out as a holdout texture. So let's just come out here, select this. We're going to make this our holdout material that we created earlier. And then same thing for the other grass blade. And now when we render it, it should be our holdout texture right here. Okay, so that is looking good now. We do need to add some children and make this a little bit more populated. Now for particles, you can actually increase the number. But what's nice about hair dynamics and everything is that you can actually create children, and children will basically be duplicates of the particles. For this one, I think I'm just going to stick with simple. Now you could do interpolated, but I think interpolated does up the render time and everything. So I'm just going to stick with this, and you can see that we now have a lot more grass in our scene. One final thing that you just want to make sure that you have selected. I know this was in my first render, so we had some grass in the middle of our object and everything. The way I found to actually fix that is to come up here to emission. We're going to hit source, and instead of from emit from faces, we're going to hit emit from vertices, and that should actually allow the grass to be more localized around this area and not spawn anywhere in the center right here. Okay, so now let's actually go ahead and render that out to see what that looks like. Okay, so here is what we have right now. We can see that that's really blended it in a lot and really helped with the realism of our scene and everything. However, it's a little too much. It's a little overbearing on this and everything. So what we can actually do is come out of here. And we're actually just going to come to the top view, and just so we can go into wireframe to see that a little bit more. And then with this selected, we can just make this come out a little bit. Just because we don't want it to be overbearing in our scene. We want it to blend it in a little bit, but not a lot and everything. So now let's just, with that resized up, let's just render that image again and see how that looks. Okay, so here's the result we got. We can see that it's a little less around the edges and stuff. So that is looking pretty good. If you wanted to, you can mess around with the weight paint settings again and your vertex group to get rid of some of these patches and everything. But I think they actually look pretty good and add into our scene, so I'm going to keep them. Okay, so now the next thing that we need to do is to actually add in our little thing below here, our Minecraft world and everything. This is actually the fun part of the tutorial, because if I render this out now, it'll basically have nothing below here and be just an empty void and everything. So like I said, this is the fun part of the tutorial. Now you'll actually need a separate program. Link to that is in the description below. But basically that program will take whatever world that you have in your Minecraft world and take that and convert it to mesh. So what we need to do is actually go ahead and launch Minecraft. So here is my Minecraft launcher. I can't believe I'm doing this. I feel like a gaming YouTube channel, but let's just go ahead and hit play. Okay, so here we are inside of Minecraft. All you need to do is come to single player. We're just going to create a new world, or if you have a world that you want to import in, you can also use that. But I'm just going to create a new world right here. You can change it to creative, however you want to. Just create that world. I actually have a world that I like up here. Let's actually go into that real quick, just show you around. You do want to make sure that you launch Minecraft so that we have this world and everything. But here is my world I selected. It's a nice jungle biome over here. You can kind of see this little thing over here, so that looks pretty cool. So this is the part I'm wanting to load in and everything. So once you have launched it and everything, that's all you need to do is just launch that. Now you can actually go out of that. Okay, so now you actually need the program I was talking about, Mineways. That's going to be in the description for you guys to download. But you just want to extract that wherever you want to, and you'll have all of this stuff. This is the program right here, so let's just launch that real quick. If you get this pop-up, don't really worry about it, because it'll say that your older worlds will need to be converted to the newer ones and everything, so just hit OK if you have that. Then we can go up to File, Open World, and what's nice is it already goes into your Worlds folder and actually shows you all your worlds. So here's the world I was in, so I'm just going to upload that. We can see that it's the same jungle biome that I was showing you guys earlier, so that's real nice. We can actually go ahead and right-click, and we're just going to click and drag the area we actually want to import inside Blender. So here's my area. You'll see it gives you some warning, and all that basically says is that it'll increase this depth thing to match so that all the blocks in this thing I selected are going to show up in our OBJ. So we just want to hit yes for that, and you can see that our depth is now like that. I can actually mess around with the depth if you want to see that a little bit. So if I scroll in and out, you can see that we have different blocks showing up and everything. And so we basically just want to set that to be whatever selects the highest. So for me it was 27, but I just set it a little bit lower than that. So once we have that selected, it's real easy. We can just hit File, Export for rendering, and then we need to make a new folder. I just made mine Blender OBJ right here. So we actually do need to make a file name. So let's just name this Blender World like that. All these settings don't really matter, so I'm just going to hit OK like that, and then it should export that out. Okay, so it has successfully exported. We can go ahead and hit yes like that and just minimize that real quick. And now we actually need to import that inside of Blender. So let's go ahead and do that by hitting File, then going to Import, and then it exported as a OBJ, so we need this wavefront OBJ. And then we just need to find wherever we select that, and here is our OBJ right here, so we can just import that in. Okay, so ours has successfully imported inside of Blender. You can see it here, so that is very cool. And what's nice about it is that it automatically textures it for you as well. So if we go to Material Preview, you can see that. We will have to do some texture work, but it's not that big of a deal. So it is one object, so we can just go ahead and scale that down just a little bit since it's so big by default. And then we basically just need to place this in our like scene and everything. So I'm just going to scale that down a little bit over here. And then just place that where I think it looks pretty cool. So like that. That looks pretty cool right there. Maybe over just a tad like that. Okay, so this is what I'm going to stick with and everything. You can, of course, play around with your own world and everything. You just want to make sure that when you look down in the hole, you don't see the void or anything. So like that, you don't want to see any of that green grass over there. You want to make sure it covers up the whole part of it. Now, if you actually come down into rendered view, you will see that we do have some render issues and everything. We can see that the vines actually have this black color. The leaves aren't transparent and everything like that. So that's actually because we exported it out as an OBJ and everything. And the way it textures its object, it doesn't know how Blender does its alpha channel or anything. So we actually need to manually do that. So let's select this over here. We're going to come over here and we have all of these menus over here. We can see that it's separated out by object. So that is really nice. We actually need to come out to the shading tab and then go back into the object over here. So again, like I said, we need to find all the blocks that have missing transparency and everything. The only ones I can see are the leaves, the vines, and then this water over here, and maybe some of the grass down there, even though that'll be so small. We won't really see it, but we can still do it just for the sake of that. So we actually need to come out here and find those blocks. So we have stationary water right here, and this is going to be the same process for all of these. I'll show you the first two, but for all of these that don't have the transparency, which is shown by this black, you can do the same method. And that method is really simple. We're just going to take the alpha of this and plug it into the alpha of the principal BSDF, and that has actually fixed it. Now if we view the water, we can actually see some of the blocks below it and some of the transparency and everything. So that's looking really good. We can do that with our next one. Next one we'll do is the leaves. Okay, so we have these oak leaves here. We can just come over here, select this, bring that down, hit the alpha to the alpha of the principal BSDF. And now we should see that we actually have transparency in our leaves. I'm just going to do that for all the other ones, such as the vines, the grass, and maybe some of the kelp down here. But it is the same process as these. Just find it over here and replace the alpha in the alpha of the principal BSDF. Okay guys, so I have successfully done all the transparency for all my objects and stuff. We zoom in right here, we can see that the vines, the grass, and everything looks like how they do in Minecraft. Now one thing I will say about the actual conversion little software that we use is that for some reason I can never get the textures to be that high quality and everything. I'm sure there's a little thing inside the program that you can actually change that around, but for the sake of my thing, we're not going to be close enough to actually notice that. So I'm just going to leave it like that. I haven't tested around too much into it, but if you are viewing it from closer, there might be some options that you can actually up the resolution of these textures and everything. But this is looking pretty good and everything. Let's actually go ahead and render this out to view what this looks like. Okay, I think that looks a lot better and got rid of that little edge and everything. Just play around with it, try to get a result that you're happy with. But this is what I'm happy with, so that is looking pretty good. Finally, the final thing that we need to do is go ahead and render this out. So let's come here, exit out of this, and then we can go up to the output properties. Make sure that all of these are correct, which they are. I did shoot in 24 FPS, so that is all good. Then we need to set out a new folder. Now for the sake of mine, I'm just going to go ahead and render it out as an image sequence, since it is such a long process. In case it fails or crashes or anything, I won't have lost all my progress or anything. So let's come out here, let's make a new folder. I'm just going to name mine final image sequence, like that. Just go inside of there, and you don't need to name it. Blender will automatically name it. So let's hit accept, go PNG, RGBA, and compression down to 0, so that is all looking good. And now finally that we have that, we can go ahead and render out our final image sequence. Okay guys, so once all of those image sequences have actually rendered out, a quick way to combine those is to just go into video editing, and then you can just place it here, go to add, and then we need to add a image sequence like that. Just select all those images, and everything. Now this is a separate image sequence I did before, so don't worry if it didn't look the same. This is just for demonstration purposes. But you can see that now we have all of this out here like that, and it's nice converted and everything. And then we can just come out up here to the output properties again. We need to specify a new location for it, so I'm just going to name it final, like that. Hit accept, and then instead of PNG sequence, we need a FFmpeg video. In the encoding, we can do MP4, and then set this to high quality, like that. And then you can just render the animation again, and that'll give you a video format. But anyways, guys, here is our final result we got from this tutorial. I think it looks very nice and blended in and everything. This is kind of the first time I'm messing around with actually doing some holdout textured grass to actually blend in the scene, and I actually thought it turned out pretty well. Let me know what you guys thought about this tutorial, if it helped you guys out a lot. I thought it was just kind of a cool effect and everything. But anyways, guys, we have a Patreon and Discord. Links to those are in the description below. But anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.